Hi, my name is Hovannes, and I'm going to be doing a track breakdown on my newest track called Little Nightmares. Um, Before anything, I kind of wanted to introduce the game and, well, why I named this track Little Nightmares. It's based off a video game by Tarsier Studios. It's a horror based slash puzzle platformer. You play as this little individual right here. That's why I'm wearing this shirt for today. You go through a ship called the Maw. You enter all into these little rooms and basically try to figure out what's going on. One of the main things that caught my attention with Little Nightmares was obviously the aesthetic, the darkness to it, the horror aspect. But aside from looks, the actual audio, the all from the sound design to the music, specifically the music. I believe the composer's name is Tobias Lila. Lila, I might be pronouncing it wrong, but yeah, Tobias Lila. He composed the score for both the first game and the second game. Crazy soundtrack. If you get a chance, you should listen to it. How the track came to be. A couple years ago, obviously, I ended up playing the first game for the first time, and I probably replayed the game. I'm gonna say 10 to 15 times, 10 to 15 plus times. I tried overachieving, getting all the trophies and whatnot, etc. But after I finished playing the first game, I knew I wanted to make a track behind it. So one of the very first things that I remember doing is going to a friend's house. That day, I believe, his niece had left toys around the house, like on the floor, outside, in the back. So I took my interface and microphone over to his place that day to record anything and everything. And I think this was during the time where I was starting to make the track. Here are clips of what I recorded that day. This is what it sounds like.
I always sing when I'm in a good mood. All right, let's do this. I can't hear you. Okay, everybody. A 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah, that keeps going. But basically, that was sort of the inspiration behind it, because a lot of the influence of the sound from the games is based upon a child that's lost and has nowhere to go. So it's interesting how both the composers and sound designers take this little child who's literally small in the game and create like such a huge big sound behind the game. But yeah, that was basically the inspiration behind wanting to start the track. This was back in like 2019. This is what it sounds like. You'll also be able to hear the similarities and differences from this version to the complete and new version.
Sound waves reaching the microphone are changed into impulses of Alex, the most tremendous new musical experience you can have.
Freedom of the body helps in freeing the mind.
It looks something like this.
my very first track breakdown. But I'm gonna try to go through my full project now of the final version of Little Nightmares. I'm gonna start off with the intro. Clearly from the 2020 version that you just heard, the same similar intro I just had, which would be this.
Sound waves reaching the microphone are changed into impulses of Alex the most tremendous new musical.
So, based around that, Little Nightmares 2, the sequel to the original game, is heavily influenced on televisions for some reason. I wanted to take that aspect of the introduction being an introduction to the song itself. I had these recordings of a TV host saying these lines, being this the full version, the final version.
Sound waves reaching the microphone are changed into It's the most tremendous new musical experience you can have.
The body helps in freeing the mind.
It looks something like this.
On top of that, I added a record scratch, or vinyl crackle, I guess you can say. A button, basically like how a TV, I guess back in the day when I don't even know, I can't even say exactly, but old TVs used to have knobs that you'd have to actually flip to go through a channel. I could be completely wrong, but that's what I tried to make here, or kind of replicate. And each click basically goes with each broadcast change or channel change. And as well as another kind of staticky sound. Almost like the TV starting. A little bit more noise, and all of that together basically gave the pre-intro, whatever you want to call it, to the song.
Sound waves reaching the microphone are changed into It's the most tremendous new musical experience you can have.
The body helps in freeing the mind.
It looks something like this.
I thought that was the perfect segue to go into the track, especially with that last line of the broadcaster saying it looks a little something like this.
Body helps in freeing the mind.
It looks something like this.
It looks something like this. Now the intro clearly went through a bunch of versions of this. That 2020 demo that I played was literally probably version 1. This project is named version 3. But I could guarantee you this is probably like version 10, maybe more. This, I believe I actually finished in 2023, like beginning of January. I just kept the name as it was. But yeah, so this intro was always something I had in mind prior to even playing it or listening to it, kind of to give some kind of background. In the game Little Nightmares, again, you are this little girl traveling inside what seems to be a submarine. It's called the Maw. You go through all these little rooms, deal with a bunch of enemies. The game almost looks like a child's nightmare, literally, mixed with Tim Burton, I guess you can say. The adults, enemies, are all mangled and twisted looking. To approach this intro, I obviously had an idea in mind. One of the scenes in the game, I believe it was towards the end of it, you play as a protagonist named Six. The little girl's name here is named Six. She actually ends up outside the ship finally for once, because throughout the whole game you're in a ship going through what seems to be a prison area, the janitor's headquarters, the chef's, their kitchen, and then I think following that you go to the food room, basically. Well, prior to that food room or that cafeteria-esque place where all these mangled and twisted looking adults are sitting there eating, you actually exit the ship prior to re-entering it. I remember seeing that and playing that for the first time, and the sound again, the music, the feeling of actually exiting the ship for the first time was probably the most overwhelming and anxiety filled feeling I had when playing it for the first time. I want to show that scene and a clip of that scene so you guys can know what I'm talking about. And again, the video's gonna start off with the girl actually exiting the ship for the very first time, so you'll get to witness that. Yeah, crazy. I love it. One of my favorites. I took that whole scene as inspiration to be the introduction for this song. I'm gonna play the intro first and then I'll start explaining as I go or as it gets to the actual chorus or drop. Curating to the scene that I was talking about, I literally started to envision what the scene was. You had this child exiting a ship, a huge ship. Ships obviously have these mainline horns that are supposed to sound huge and big and wide. It's in the middle of the ocean. You're surrounded by a body of water. You kind of don't know where you are, to be honest, too, which isn't supposed to be a normal thing, and you feel helpless. You're alone, basically. One of the main things that I did was obviously start with that main horn idea. It was a sub layer, clearly like labeled here, but I went through a bunch of variations again in terms of choosing the actual sound. Like these two tracks are muted. I'm pretty sure they were older versions, but I guess to make up the actual horn sound was a sub. I believe I tried to actually incorporate a ship's main, like a video of a ship's main horn going off in the video and then tried to resample it, but it just didn't work out as well. I think I also tried a plugins sound, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, but these are the sounds that make it up, I believe. So one of them just like a full sub layer. It's distorted like crazy with harmonics just falling up. And a low mid layer. Which is playing the second. So this is my root note. And I believe these sounds come in in the midway point. This was definitely a combination, I believe, of both of these two tracks going through Valhalla Shimmer, hence why it's called Main Sub Shimmered. And then I'm not too sure what this one is, but yeah, this was probably resampled from something. I wish I had like my original MIDI tracks to kind of go through and what I did and how I created these sounds, but I don't. These are the old sounds. I have no idea what they were. Maybe they were just taking up too much or... just never ended up using it. Let's see, this looks like... So that sounded more like an actual ship horn, but I have no idea why. I just never ended up using it. Layers. Okay, so this one is actually very interesting. The lady, one of the main antagonists in the game. She doesn't have a name. They call her the lady or geisha lady. She's in a geisha outfit. She has a section in the game when you first, I guess, approach her. You're supposed to kind of sneak behind her. I believe she's looking at herself in the mirror and humming a song to herself. I actually ended up taking clips of her humming and started mangling with it, stretching the audio out, pitching it up and or down, and using her swells as layers to the sound. These aren't originally how it sounds like, but it is her, hence why it's named The Lady. And I just stretched it out and completely like messed with the original. The original one is absolutely beautiful. You should definitely listen to that as well. Overall, you should listen to the whole soundtrack of the game. Both games. Again, one of my favorites. I still go back to it. I actually have a vinyl back there. It's there for both the first and second game. Definitely listen to it. This is one of the layers for Lady. Layer 2. And layer 3. Okay, so clearly layer 2 panned all the way left, layer 3 panned all the way right, but one of my, like, it's just ear candy, one of my favorite things that I do, and I think it's in this clip. No, it's not, because it was already warped and consolidated and whatnot, but there's a pitch drop happening within the sound. So obviously I pitched it up, but there's this eerie pitch drop, which, if I'm not mistaken, in almost all of, not almost all, but majority of like horror films, like a technique that they do is pitch the sound, the main root note of it, either down a semitone or two. This could have been two if I'm not mistaken, but listen again, you'll be able to hear how it actually is stagnant and neutral, but then it slowly drops down. And this is to kind of build tension as well within the song. So love it. It adds to it. I guess all of them together now to just hear how one swells into the other, into the other. It's cool knowing that you took an element from the game, throw it in. I mean, it's very subtle. Obviously, you don't hear this like front in the mix, but it's nice to kind of leave hints of stuff. Plus, you've kind of filled up your track. Not too sure about what this cello swell sounds like, but it's a cello swell. Yeah, layers. Grain destroyed. I forgot what it was, but I threw it into a granulator and more effects and completely destroyed it. So this is what it became. It sounds like it was a vocal thrown into like some kind of a reverb or delay plugin. Another section of the intro. Water phones. I love the sound of a water phone. If you guys don't know what a water phone is, look it up. It's a cool instrument. They are literally the eeriest sound to me in my ears. Water phones played a huge part in the soundtrack. They are a huge sound to horror, thriller films, I feel like, overall. So I knew I wanted to throw it in here for sure. I believe I found sounds online to sample, overall resample, stretch, mangle again. Majority of the sounds I've been playing on each track I think are all one pitch, but I think the water phones actually play, well, not a melody, but they do have different notation. So yeah, let's hear the first layer. Second layer. And I mean, clearly you could see visually the first layer kind of morphs into the second layer and then back to the first one and into the second and first, second. This is the second layer. Okay, get the idea. Let's hear them together. I love it. It's almost like the two sounds are dancing with each other. One of them is pretty high in pitch, the other one's lower, but they are hitting different notes. So it kind of keeps it on a very like non-stop feeling. I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, they don't break away from each other, which is cool. More layers again, just adding to the eeriness to the song. A high-pitched violin, shifting sign. Literally shifting. It's just going from pitch to pitch, but it sounds like almost like a waterphone mixed with the violin. I could be wrong. I mean, I named it shifting sine tones, so it could have been just a sine wave, and then more sine tones. And there's a delay on it. Let's hear how it sounds. So that's actually the main sound that you hear in the song. I guess that's more or so in the forefront of the mix, with the horn-like sounds of the ship. Very simple, but it adds to the eerie feel to it. So that was the ship as a whole. I'll play it one more time, all these elements together. Again, this was me just trying to augment the ship itself with the horns, the bass, the lady, the waterphones, and then this melody of the sine tone. Obviously, musically, and then more so realistically with the ship. Musically being the lady, the waterphones, the violin, cello swells, the sine tones, them having actual notation, while as the ship just being low end bass, trying to augment the reality of a ship being in front of you. This is all of those together. Along with that, I obviously, like I mentioned before, wanted to kind of create the setting that we were by the ship, by the Maw in the game. One of the main things, obviously, in the scene, the video that I captured, that I showed you, was that Six, this little girl, is in the middle of the ocean, nowhere. I took that influence still and added effects. Effects being seagulls, the sound of water, the seagulls and the water. This is just the sound of ocean, waves crashing. And seagulls. Again, I wish I had the processing on it But for the seagulls, I mean, let's hear it first. The sound of the seagulls was thrown into a convolution reverb, and for those who don't know, convolution reverb is basically you being able to control the room that your verb is set in, your reverb is set in. I don't know what reverb I used. I'm pretty sure it was Ableton's convolution reverb. There is some kind of room depth put into these seagull sounds. The one I ended up going with kind of made it seem like these seagulls were literally in the middle of the ocean, but I tried to, again, augment that setting of what it would sound like if you were this individual in the middle of the ocean, hearing these birds surrounded you. Like, if you try to actually imagine how that sounds like to you, putting yourself in that position, you're not going to hear a dead-end room, and a seagull in this room, for example, would sound completely different compared to if you're literally at the beach and a seagull that's probably 10 to 20 feet away from you. You should try to picture how that would sound in a room of the size of the ocean and the beach. It's not a room, but you get what I mean. There's a hint of like where these seagulls are in terms of space. With the ocean together. Yeah, just close your eyes. Picture yourself at the beach, but instead of the beach, you're on a ship and you're a little child lost. Okay, everything for the intro. I think that was literally all the intro put together. There isn't that much, I mean, obviously, other than the actual musical elements being at the top, but that's the intro. So let's just play again the pre-intro to the main intro, all the way up until the drop.
Sound waves reaching the microphone are changed into impulse, the most tremendous new musical experience you can have.
The body helps in freeing the mind.
It looks something like this.
Time for the chorus or the drop. There's a lot to it. Again, bear with me as I go through this. I'm gonna try to go step by step. This chorus section, I'm definitely gonna combine the main sounds, being any instruments, sound design. I'm gonna throw in the drums in there, the effects as well. So I'm gonna try to go through each section on its own, and then break it down and then combine multiple sections together to hear how it sounds in context with one another. The first one that I want to start with is this vocal group. So this sound also originates with my friend's niece's little toy box that I was talking about. This was one of the earliest sounds that I had. This is me. This weird vocal track is me. My take on trying to make more horror influenced sounds. One of my friends made fun of me, saying that the sound sounded like a dog panting, which after he said made complete sense. This is a recording of me just breathing into the microphone, and I could be wrong, but at the time of recording and processing it, I believe I started panning the sound. This is just a quick clip of me breathing heavily into the microphone. somewhat of a rhythm to it. So I mean, I'm pretty sure there was a bunch of this take recording, but yeah, you could clearly see the processing of it probably being the left and then right, left, right signal. But you could tell there's definitely a rhythm to it. I mean, organizing it in a way to be on the grid. If I was to put kind of the clicker on, you could tell there's definitely a rhythm to it. This played a huge part in, again, creating the sound of the song. I always wanted to incorporate this in. That was the vocal. The sub. The sub was also very interesting. Again, this project doesn't do it justice, but I had so many different versions of some kind of a low end layer, sub layer. I didn't know if I wanted it to just be a sub layer or kind of a low mid layer. I was back and forth between it. I mean, there's definitely a couple of versions, you could tell. I ended up staying with this. Again, there were a bunch of times, moments, parts where I wanted to kind of do not as just a single root note non-stop going. I actually tried playing in a melody with the sub, but then I don't know, something about it just being the root note of the song, which is G sharp, is in G sharp minor. Just keeping it on that root note, and then the main thing was the actual rhythm of it, like how I wanted it to be, like a quarter note, eighth note, triplets. I was going back and forth between that as well. So sculpting the sound and finding the actual rhythm was my main struggle, so to speak. Ended up going with just the G sharp root note and this rhythm in specific. One of the cool techniques, I forgot who I learned it from, but running a parallel chain of your low end, one of them being a complete dry signal, meaning you literally don't put anything on it, and then one of them being a wet signal, being some kind of effect layer to it. I also didn't want it to be like that wide. It is a low end sound, so you can get phasing issues. So I kept it mono still. I believe the EQ, yeah, so definitely getting rid of the mids in it as well. Trash for distortion, saturation, distortion, multiband, just pushing the mids and highs. Another EQ, just adding to the high end. So, I mean, it's a very subtle layer, but I think if I'm not mistaken, I could have probably just kept it as is because of the second layer. For the sub layer, I probably had this wet dry signal. I don't think I ended up going forth with it as much. I think I just did not even use it. Just kept the dry signal. The sub had a bunch of effects on. I believe I wanted to mix a signal that was more, with convolution and distortion on it, and then just a dry signal for the low end. Probably trying to control and tame the sides more, because I'm pushing it immensely here. But the sub layer just kept it as is, nothing crazy. The second layer though, I believe this was a fifth. This layer I wanted it to just be subtly in the back of the sub. I didn't want it to compete with it, but I also wanted something that was kind of counter-reacting to the main root note. So I'm just gonna play it just to see. Okay, I think this is the perfect fifth. So my root note, my song is in G sharp. That would be D sharp, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, this layer is clearly more so. Yeah, so this was definitely the dry signal, and this was the wet signal. of the sound. I muted the dry signal because I probably liked the wet signal as it was. Again, I'm assuming, so this sound was definitely going to be the wider sound. More emphasis on the sides rather than the middle mono. Yeah, I believe this was literally just the sub layer duplicated, added a reverb to it, and layered it with the sub. Again, it's a very subtle sound, but it adds to it. So this is the sub on its own. This is the layer on its own. And together. If you have a good pair of headphones, speakers, you'd probably be able to hear that even better. But it adds, again, it adds a layer of a room to the sub. But yeah, like the sub layer for majority of the song is literally just those notes. It's on that G sharp with the perfect fifth on top, that same groove, that same flow throughout the whole track until the first half of the drop. So if I play those two here, you could clearly tell this main sub layer is muted here, but then this sound is introduced into the song. Now this is clearly called Limbo 2022, I believe, sound design, where I was just making a bunch of sounds, and this part in specific stood out to me. I just took little parts of it, almost like a puzzle piece, and started fitting it together and got this. Same thing. I mean, I could show you if it's here. Probably not here, but let's just take one of the sounds. I hope I haven't consolidated any of this. Yeah, so this is just like a mess of probably like anywhere from, I'm gonna say like 5 to 10 minutes of me just literally opening up a plugin, a synth, routing a bunch of knobs from distortion to EQ, filters, delays, I think, and whatnot, macroing them to my MIDI keyboard, the actual knobs on my MIDI keyboard, and hitting record and just twisting away and getting all these happy mistakes, basically. So I mean, I could just go through it real quick and just. Chi was the one that showed this technique where he'll go into a synth and basically macro a bunch of knobs, a bunch of effects, and literally start twisting the knobs away and hitting record and letting it do its thing. I mean, with Ableton, you could even set up LFOs that literally go off on their own depending on what rate you set it to, the amount, and you could literally just hit record and let it do its thing. So that's one of my favorite things. I have an actual folder of just recording a bunch of sound designs. I mean, it's not a lot, but these are long sessions of sound design. So kind of going back to this, I took an old recording and threw it in here, and it worked like for what I was going for. The sound, like that, this specific section of that sound design session fit in with the track. I think all I had to do was correct its pitch. Maybe not. Maybe this sound design session was also in G sharp. I could be wrong, but yeah, but wasn't much to it. Again, parallel. This layer So I wouldn't necessarily say this is the dry or wet signal as in comparison to the other sub layer. So clearly this layer is straight mono, affecting the mono, the low end, the sub layer. I'm getting rid of the mids and sides from anywhere from, what is this, like 250 and up. So you just hear the sub layer itself being dead center. Let's see where we are. And then this layer is literally emphasizing the highs, the crunch of that sound, getting rid of the sides and the mids, basically from 250 and below. I mean, obviously I am taming some of the highs for mixing purposes, but yeah, this is the sides. And you can even tell, I mean, I have this meter playing here just for a visual representation. This is the lows. You could tell how like it's literally dead centered and the main focus is in the center. It kind of does shift to the left and right, but it is mainly mono. Whereas the sides are literally being pushed to the sides. And together. Parallel processing is, I think, one of the most underrated things. I don't know how much it's being used. It's not that I don't see it, but it's literally my go-to for anything. When you want to tame a sound throughout the frequency range, you could literally solo out the lows, the mids, the highs, and post-process them separately on their own. Get the highs spread wide, get the low end just mono and straight down the center. And on top of that, you can add your own effects afterwards. It's endless. It's literally endless. But yeah, that was this sound. I mean, I'm not too sure how it would sound without the effects. Let's just hear. I'm kind of curious. So it's more so taming it, I think. I mean, it's not that much of a drastic difference for sure, but I mean, you could. Yeah, you could tell the low end definitely goes more centered rather than. It's definitely all over the place there, but it's tamed just a little bit. But yeah, that's the sub layer. Nothing crazy, nothing insane happening in the sub. Kind of keeping it just on a constant groove, rhythm, flows. It just stood out to me. I liked it more. I don't know, including with that perfect fifth layer. I loved it. Kind of also interesting. I just remembered too, right as I said it. So this sub and this second layer here are obviously this one playing G sharp, the root note. This one playing the perfect fifth. This sound, this resampled sound, is in D sharp, also being the perfect fifth. So it's almost as if I'm playing the root note and then, well, not almost as if, but I am playing the root note and then jumping down to my perfect fifth. So I mean, if I was to just play these guys. Jumping back and forth between G sharp and D sharp in that second half. I guess that was really the only major notation I had with the low end. Drums. Okay. The kick. I made this kick in kick 2. Oh no, sorry, it wasn't kick 2. Again, shout out Chi. He has a tutorial on how he approaches drums where he'll synthesize a kick. He'll take an acoustic layered kick and then he'll make an actual click transient sound and combine the three and make his actual kick. This is what that was. I mean, obviously there is an EQ on it, so I mean, without the EQ, even though I did not end up using this at the end, which is fucking shitty to say, but This is that kick. I think here, let me also get rid of whatever, yeah. Again, this was that same technique, that same approach of synthesizing a kick, which I think was done in Operator. I wish I had the processing. Maybe it's in this actually, hold on. Oh my god, it is, okay. Operator for the main sound. Oh shit. You watch any tutorial out there, it's a sine wave. You mess with the pitch envelope to get your actual tonality of it, especially being the attack and initial attack of the sound. Sine wave, and then just distortion. So that's the synthesized kick. This is the acoustic kick layer. I mean, there you go, you can hear it better. And then white noise, using white noise to make just a transient. The transient necessarily doesn't have to be the start at the very starting point. I mean, it's kind of delayed by 10 milliseconds here, so it adds to the body of the kick, but it's a snap sound overall, which for like the high end of a kick sound, it's basically white noise again, and just mangling with the ADSR, and all together so that's how that original kick came to be. And obviously I started fading it, messing with it, kind of getting rid of majority of the tail and the body of the kick. But towards the end of this whole process, literally towards the end of this project, I think maybe a week or two prior, I think it was like about a week and a half prior, I started to hate the kick. I didn't like how it fit in the mix. Noisia released a sample pack recently, and I just ended up using one of their kicks, literally EQ and drum bus at most. Yeah, I guess, yeah, with this, just real quick, I wanted to tame the high end. It's Noisia, you don't need to do much, so very basic. But I just love how it turned out. I love how it turned out in context with the song. Snare. The snare comes in the second half. I was literally going back and forth with myself if I wanted to actually have a snare. But I ended up using just the kick, and just the kick only up until the second half when a few percussion elements kick in. But I finally ended up like kind of letting go of the idea of if I should have a snare happen in the first section of the chorus or not. I ended up just going with the second. These were part of the original. I just ended up muting them. I didn't like them. So this hard snare is what I ended up going with for the final. These are the layers it consists of. Well, the layers it consists of, yeah. And another Noisia sample. So you could tell that one, the attack is completely gone. That's definitely like for the high end and more so tail, but yeah, the three of them together. Nothing crazy or interesting happening in them either. Very bland samples, so to speak. But yeah, that's the kick and snare. Percussion. The percussion is where it actually gets more interesting. So again, I was going back and forth with how much of the percussion I wanted to use in the first section of the chorus in comparison to the second. Clearly here in the first half of the first chorus, they're muted. I was debating if I should have it or not, but something about it just being the kick, the sub, the effects, the musical elements just alone as their own, I really liked. And then slowly started introducing percussion later down the line. So I'm just gonna play a couple of them right now. Yeah, internally it is being panned. Saturation build compressor, and I think this sidechain might have been to the kick, if I'm not mistaken, but yeah, there's definitely an element of velocity that plays a huge part. Like it's internally within the sample itself. It's not like I'm doing it on my own, but I've learned to do that more so recently, where little hints of volume automation, or actually going within each sample and turning down the volume. Like I guess I kind of did there, but I completely did overall. So clearly on this first hi-hat it's at -5, the second one is at 0, I think the third one, yeah, it's at -3.5, back to 0, -3.5, -5, alternating between that -5, 0, -3.5, back and forth. It's very subtle, but it adds to it. They repeated this a lot at school, where if you were to hear an actual drummer play an instrument or play a set live, the guy's literally not going to be hitting that hi-hat with the same strength every single time. So to add the more realism to it, mess with your velocity, volume automation. And then obviously the panning played a huge part. I mean, without panning, I'm pretty sure it's very mono. It's very like dead centered in terms of the mix. But the panning made it jump left and right, adding and giving an interesting flow to it. Well, not flow, but you messing with like the stereo image of the hi-hats, which kind of adds to it in terms of both mixing and just like ear candy. So again, without it, with it, and again, hopefully you have a good pair of headphones or speakers. Jumping left and right. Same with this one. Clearly you could tell right here, I'm automating panning. Let's see how it looks. There we go. Again, even with panning, I mean, it's not necessarily volume automation, but even panning, I am not keeping it at a constant 31 to the right, 34 to the left, 31, 34, 34. No, it's jumping in between little variations and different areas of the stereo, the pan field, which adds to it. I mean, it's very subtle again, but it adds to it. I mean, if this was just dead center again, but then add the panning, it's your candy. You're definitely adding to it. Definitely like a must. These are basic ass things I'm saying. I'm pretty sure a bunch of people have done this. I just want to give a breakdown. Take whatever I say with a grain of salt. The two layers together. Yeah, and this was originally supposed to be shown or introduced in the second half of the chorus, but if I'm not mistaken, yeah, this is like the telephone effect, EQ filter being happening here, getting rid of the highs, getting rid of the lows, and yeah, I think this is a drum break loop, so. Yeah, Once you reach the second half of the full chorus, obviously all three of those are brought back, but a couple other ones. I believe this is another break loop that was chopped up, those specific sections, and like kind of puzzle pieced together there as well. It adds rhythm and flow to it. Mike's crank. Mike is my father. My dad has a storage unit of a bunch of tools, anything and everything that you could think of as a tool. I can't think of on top of my head, but I just named this Mike's crank. I think this is a wrench. I could be completely wrong. Yeah, this was me, I think, just twisting that crank, adding a layer to the song overall. So yeah, it's not necessarily like on beat too. It's not like I'm on grid with that sound. It was just a very nice like high-end layer. It takes up a lot of like highs but it's very subtle. Again, that break, bop back. And then in the section where I kind of have that regular sub playing to then have a counterpart to it being that second part of that resampled bass, I introduced another break loop, but again chopped up. And another. I could be completely wrong, but I'm pretty sure this was mangled a lot more prior. Either Trash 2 or Rift for distortion. But obviously I kind of chopped it up a little bit and placed specific sections right after each other. Yeah, in terms of percussion, that's also it. Yeah, I could play just the percussion all together. So I'll start from here just to get an idea of how minimal it is at first, to then adding a bunch on top of each other, and then with how the second half of the chorus, how one kind of counteracts the other with the two break layers coming in after. So this is the first half. Now, to put everything besides the vocals, I'll add the vocals in later, but to add the sub, the drums, and the percussion all together, just to hear it in those areas that I just played all together, this is what it sounds like. I'm gonna do effects next, even though these play a huge part in the main sounds, the instruments, the sound design. There isn't a lot to it, so I'm gonna go through these for what it is. I mean, again, it's effects. Majority of them are risers, down risers, quick flutters that kind of like transition from one section to another. Yeah, that's kind of it. But the main two I would say are these that play a huge part in the actual chorus and overall sculpting the sound there. But everything else, I mean, just basic risers. This happens from transitioning from this first half of the second chorus to the next half of it. It's just 3 glass samples or glass breaking samples just layered on top of each other, reversed to transition to the next. Yeah, nothing crazy in terms of those. It's literal little nuances to make one section go to the other. Nothing crazy. I didn't do anything insane crazy with any of these to say they deserve a spotlight, a delay. This noise filter, I think this was actually like synthesized. Nothing crazy though, just the most basic of things. Everything else samples, drag and drop samples, reversed. This sound, I believe, is also a waterphone. I could be completely wrong. It is a waterphone, it's labeled waterphone, but there's a bunch of stuff happening. These were definitely mangled in terms of pitch. Obviously, I guess I went up an octave, but then also one semitone. Maybe that was to correct the actual pitch I'm in order for it to be in key. But yeah, these waterphones are definitely, you know, they're all at different pitches. Oh, I guess these were, maybe this one. No, okay, well, so they're just jumping in between 2 different pitches, but I could be wrong. I'll double check. I think they were consolidated. A few of them being higher in pitch, the other couple being lower in pitch, but I mean, just the sounds alone. So main things to take away from it are for sure convolution, reverb overall. I don't know why I have 2 layers of them, but I just do. And panning, again, if you pay attention from the beginning of the sound, it starts at 42 to the right and goes all the way 36 to the left. So the sound starts off in your right ear and ends up to your left ear. And I think I reversed that when going into the next one, 40 to the left, 35 to the right. So again, start from the right here, ends at the left ear, start at the left ear, end at the right ear. As well as pitch. Again, these sounds were definitely processed and done in a different way. In older projects, I just dragged them as they were consolidated. You could definitely tell there's a pitch drop happening to it. There's some kind of like high-end glittery texture as well. I wish I had the actual processing to show it, but yeah. In some parts you could tell that the volume just completely goes off. That's due to following the track's progression. So like they're kind of like swooped in real fast, or transitioned in real fast, you could tell from here. But yeah, that's that waterphone layer, and I believe this was a vocal. This was actually added more recently into the track. It's again very subtle. It's down negative 22 decibels, so it's not that loud at all. It's literally in the background, but I think in here, yeah. So this is what I was talking about earlier with the introduction, the waterphones, and like how in thriller and horror music, they usually tend to drop a sample, sound, whatever you want to call it, by 1 to 2 semitones. This one I think it's just kept at its original root note. But not only is this one pitched up 8 semitones, from that 8, no, which would definitely technically be E in the case of G sharp and G sharp minor. From E, I'm just slowly, as you can tell on the screen, it's slowly just dropping down to D sharp, which is the perfect fifth in the key of G sharp minor. So this one just being G sharp. This is the minor sixth dropping to the perfect fifth, 1 semitone down. Yeah. With the pitch, I remember drawing this one in. So this is up 3, so it would be B. So the sample itself is in B, like the note is B, but I'm going up a semitone and then back down 2 semitones from it and keeping it at that second, at that -2 pitch. So we would be going to C down 2 to A sharp. So that's literally just playing the major second at the very end of this tail. So we start off on B, we go up to C, and then we go down to A sharp. And all those keys or notes are in the key of G sharp minor, besides C, which is this little peak here. But that's to add emphasis to it. So again. Yeah, it's those subtle things. I love it. And again, I mean, you can kind of tell with both these sounds, they kind of feed into one another, especially starting in the second half. So just them two together. With the drums, the sub, just to hear it all, it sounds like this. Time for the musical elements. This is the most clustered mess of a section throughout this whole track. Again, various versions going all the way back to 2019. Versions in 2020 and 2021, 2022 obviously being this one, and then finished in 2023. So many sounds were pot in for trial and error, muted, deleted, not used, kept there for no reason, and muted. It was a lot of back and forth for how I want, like how this ended up being. I mean, it's very subtle and minimal, but like that's kind of the intention. Like I wanted it to be. I didn't want it to be such a cluttered track in a sense, even though it is, but in terms of the sounds, I didn't want them. I wanted it to be more musical rather than hey, look at the sound that I made. Like, I wanted it to be more of a adventure in musicality rather than just sound design, so to speak. So there's a little bit of notation, not that much, but majority of them are one note heavy influence, maybe jumping up a note or two. Nothing drastic, nothing crazy, but yeah, let's try to start from the top. The sine tone, let's see. So this was definitely one of the sounds that was introduced in, like, I'm gonna say version 7, version 8, where I kept going back and forth with it, but I did end up keeping it because I loved the tonality of it as well as the sound. It's almost like a vocal mixed with a whistle in a sense. This is one of the layers that has more notes to it. This was kind of the same idea from the introduction of the horns. If I was to play, it's actually gonna be probably more higher. I believe it's this. That melody is basically the same thing. But even more subtle, like it's in the back. There isn't much happening, like very subtle. This sine player layer as well. This was also something that was like brought into the track, like towards version again 6, 7. This wasn't like from the get-go. This wasn't from the beginning, but it's chords, nothing crazy, nothing drastic, nothing immense happening in it either. But this is it. The higher register notes are playing that same melody, but I think there's just a root note at the bottom playing with it as well, so. It's interesting how faster this plays compared to this one, which is being held here until here, until here, until here. So like the melody is being played a new note every 2 bars for this, but a new note every 4 bars for this. So we already get a change in the middle of it. So them two together. Same exact melody, just divided by 2. This plays faster, this plays slower, but they're fighting one another, and there are certain sections where, like, harmonically speaking, whenever I think this is a B or E, sorry, E plays, and this is technically a B. B is E's perfect fifth in the key of E minor, if I'm not mistaken. So having those two kind of contradict one another in the key of G sharp, you're building harmonics, and they work. They side by side, they work perfectly. Those two were definitely like the main influences in terms of like how minimal I wanted this to be, literally more musical rather than sound design based. Yeah, I really wanted to be very simple in terms of this project. The fun things though coming afterwards. So this sound, this goes back to like that sound design sesh I was talking about earlier. Majority of the sounds that I create, it's like I know what I'm doing in terms of like what effects I'm adding and the intention I'm going for when it comes to like how I want it to be portrayed, but it's not like I'm reaching for a specific sound. It's mangling. Like I never go into these sound design sessions with the intent to make that very specific sound. I go into it knowing like, hey, this tool is going to make it do this. This tool is going to make it do this. What if I combine these two tools that I just added with this third tool and it completely messes it up? Let's see how it sounds. That's literally how I go into it. That's how this sound was made. At the time, Sabroy, he's an artist, producer, crazy producer, released AS Steps. It's an arpeggiator, sequencer more or so, and it is dumb powerful. Essentially, it's a sequencer. You control your notes. You can control your root note, triplets, notation, harmonies. It's so insane to the fact that you can choose what chord the tool plays for you depending on your MIDI. Mixed with another tool that, again, Sabroy released called ASD Delay. This is delay, reverb, I think, a granulator, etc., all into one. Again, I do not know the ins and outs of it. It's more so me mangling around with what I know in terms of what a delay is, what sync does, a quarter triplet, you know, like diffusion, feedback. Those are the very few things that I can tell, but behind the box, I will not know exactly. But going on what I mentioned earlier, this sound was literally just messing around. If I was to mute both these, and wait, I don't even know what's happening in Serum. Nothing. A sine wave kind of mangled a little, down an octave. This envelope, I believe, has controlling the filter. If I was to just play this alone, I believe it's just gonna be one note. Yeah. That's all that is, without those effects. The envelope is controlling the filter to just give it that one little pluck sound, and that's it. The distortion and compression aren't even doing much. That was that initial sound. But it's the fact that when we added AS Steps, ASD Delay, so steps, once it's added on, once you have a MIDI note triggering, a MIDI clip triggering a note, it does all kinds of crazy things. I mean, without the delay again, and the notes that I chose in the key of G sharp minor. Yeah, you could control like how much of it is swinged. I believe the humanize kind of adds some element of swing as well. Yeah, the counter section, it tells like you could tell it like to count to which selected note basically. So like it jumps to this D sharp 9 and count by twos, but it's also like not in order. There's a certain randomness to it. As you could tell, it kind of jumps everywhere. So not only is it jumping internally in this sequencer, I'm actually automating, if I'm not mistaken, the octave range for the oscillator. Here I'm at 0. If you pay attention here, I go up an octave, down an octave, up an octave, down 2 octaves, up 2 octaves, down an octave, up an octave, and back to 0. So this definitely has an order to it. These guys are just controlling what pitch it jumps to. Internally in the synth, I am at G sharp. If I was to just, again, cancel the sequencer, and if this was to actually be up in sustain, you can tell the one sound itself at G sharp minor is just jumping up different octaves. So the fact that I put the sustain down all the way, you're just gonna hear the one pluck sound with the filter. So add that weird oscillator jumps with AS Steps being, it literally will play the notes that you choose. And this is a sequencer, hence why it will keep going. regardless of the envelope and serum. Now add the delay. Right when that hit, that like sound clicked, I knew I wanted to add that in. It's subtle, it's again very little-esque sounding, you know, it's not like a crazy popping sound, but I love how it sounded, so I kept it. But kept a very specific section just looping. With the layer, or layers, I guess to say with that together. Worked so well. Next sound, going back to the whole idea of there's no intention behind it. I started messing with it and this came to be. This sound in specific. And this bottom layer is just a counter to it, so I guess that alone is just these two going back and forth. All together. I used an Ableton instrument. It is. So from what this was, and again, I do not know how it's gonna sound in terms of getting rid of the delay and arpeggio or sequencer. It's a basic pluck key. Messing with the notation and adding the delay. And then resampling it, adding trash, adding more delays. I never had the intention of making that sound. That was never a, hey, let's try to make a weird pluck sound that sounds like it's almost very laser-like. Just from mangling and messing around with AS steps and AS delay are powerful. These tools also help me like get out of a comfort zone of using the same things over and over again. Like it was kind of like mindless creation of just do random shit to the bass sound and see what you get, but also like have Ableton resample that. So I would literally hit record and whatever I did to this one sound would be then like transcribed as a whole new sample and then a whole new channel, and take bits and pieces of it and throw it in and then process those and see what you could do with it. It's how those sounds came to be. Again, I don't know how it would sound without it, but I mean, even trying to get rid of effects. Seems like the majority of it was AS steps that gave it those first, I think, initial hits, and then taming the high end of the sound. Yeah, getting rid of the high end just to have the low mids of that sound was how this sound came to be. Just constantly loop back in. Okay, this one was very interesting. Again, going back to it, I had no intention of making a specific sound. I don't know why I have a serum and then a vocal synth after. A vocal synth is used to mangle vocals. Vocoders, talkbox, you know, that in itself is its own thing. But why did I go with those two? No idea. It was literally just messing around. No intention of making a specific sound. But I think what stood out to me was like, there's almost like a weird metal-like tool, like nuts and bolts kind of like sound that happens in the back of this, that the reason I kept it. And this is a subtle sound. It's nowhere in the forefront of the mix, but it's spacious, and it adds a layer to it. Just one note throughout it all, but it's those little bits and pieces in it that help me decide to keep it. This one was definitely done with intention. So about, I'm gonna say half a year ago, maybe not, I don't know. Well, actually almost a year ago, I ended up getting gifted a recorder, a wireless, you could take anywhere recorder. I believe it's the H6, I'm gonna say. Yeah, H6 Zoom recorder. If any of you guys have seen my videos on Instagram or Twitter, you know I use this recently for a lot of things. But when I got this, it unlocked a whole new world of being able to record things and completely flip them inside out and whatnot. So once I got this, I wanted to get more instruments to mess around and sample with. One of them was a child's violin. A music store was closing in. It was like a family-owned music store here, probably like 5 minutes away from me. Everything was on sale. My friend told me about it, and we went in just to look around. And then I ended up buying a classical guitar, and a child's violin. Being, I was not aware of this, but like children have their own little violins because they can't hold a full-size violin, so they have their own sizes. On a whim, I ended up buying both of those. Also keep in mind, I do not know how to play any instruments. I understand the piano at most basic, bare minimum of music theory in terms of the piano, but when it comes to strings, I have no idea. I'd have to watch a video or learn about it online to kind of recap what string is what note, for example. But I took that violin and I started randomly strumming it. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, I kept this. This is 2 minutes of me just randomly strumming at this violin and seeing what I can get out of it. So I believe that in specific was used in the finals. So yeah, those recordings were then put into Ableton and I started messing with it, and I found these two in specific that stood out to me the most. Added reverb, again convolution, some delay, two delays, multi-band, saturator, EQ, cleaning it up, shaper box for side chaining, and these guys ended up. Again, this is that same thing that I talked about earlier with horror or thriller films. The composers love to jump up like that one semitone, two semitones, whatever it may be, to add like a little kind of oomph to it, I guess you could say. So I did that with one of my recordings because I didn't intentionally do that pitch rise on the actual violin. I did it in the box, so. And then bought the other one back again. That's for the violin. These were also very subtle layers. These are actually almost as comparable to this. Very subtle, but more musical elements to it. I believe this also is following the same thing, but just a completely different sound. Together. They're being filtered, reverb to give it space again, layered on top of each other. There's such basic sounds, there's kind of no point in going into them. One of them is a Labs instrument. For any of you that don't know, Labs is free by Spitfire Audio. And then this one was made in Faceplant. I think it's like the most basic bare minimum. Yeah, like post-processing is just adding reverb, EQ, so to fix it up. This AS Width tool, also by Satboy. Saturator for distortion, more EQ, cleaning up, EQ, cleaning up, and yeah. And then this sound, introduced in the second half of the second intro. That is that sound, but the thing that's adding to it is, I do not know how to pronounce it. I think it's DTBLKFX. I don't know what it is that it does. Imanu showed this in the tutorial. You could control so many things from it. Again, I do not know the ins and outs. I am not here to explain any of these tools. Figure it out yourselves and mess around. That's the point. Very simple sounds happening in the box, and then it's just post-processing. I think pitching the actual, yeah, I'm just pitching it up 36 semitones. There's nothing to this really. Like, it started off with the bass sound. I mean, we could even see how it sounds without that. But with that, I believe if I could be completely wrong again, this contrast algorithm basically gets rid of harmonics in the sound, and then I froze it and I just pitched it up to 36. I think all of it, of course, just to get it the high end screechy eeriness. Yeah, that's it for the musical. I believe. I hope I didn't bore you and not explain exactly and everything as is, but everything together in the musical section. So yeah, I really wanted to go for an eerie feel. I wanted it to be dark. I wanted it to feel off. I didn't want it to be a heavy song. It's more so like I really wanted to be a very drone-like, an ambient sound song. Yeah, I love how it turned out. Like everything from like how long this track was sitting on my computer for to like what it turned out to be. There's a lot to it. The process of each sound and how it came to be was also very interesting. So much trial and error, figuring out what fits where and if it's worth keeping. Like it was very hectic, but for what it turned out to be, I absolutely love it. I would say I would play it one more time, but I'm pretty sure you've already heard it. But if not, Little Nightmares is out right now. You could go listen to it on Spotify, Apple Music, SoundCloud, and you could actually support me on Bandcamp. If you go on bandcamp.com/Hovhannes, that's HOVXNES, you could purchase the track there, and that directly supports me in specific. Yeah, if you have any other questions in regarding this track, anything in specific that I missed, please let me know. This is my first time doing this. If people like this, I'll continue to do more. Maybe considering opening up a Patreon if people want that, but I mean, I'm just starting off. This is my first time doing this. I hope something of this was informative. Again, no intention of this was to be a tutorial of any kind. I just wanted to give a breakdown and my insight and my perspective on how I approached this track. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want more, please let me know. If you have any questions about this track or about anything in regards to music production, please let me know. And yeah, peace.